Welcome everyone to our second episode of Unaima Podcast. It's me again, Leonardo Werner, together with Gabriel Brasil. We are going to talk a little bit more about the recent soap opera of the world of AI and technology, moving then to a second part and maybe third part of some of our reflections and philosophical issues that we find in this contemporary world related to AI and to augmented reality or extended reality technologies more generally. So, Gabriel, starting with you, what could you tell us a little bit more of the recent news involving still the issues of governance related to OpenAI? Can you say anything? Are you understanding anything that is going on, or are you still as lost as me?
Well, if I said that I really understood everything that's been going on with OpenAI, probably someone from the NSA would be knocking on my door, because or the CIA or whatnot. Because one thing that's interesting is that, well, I should start already with the old disclaimer that we're probably outdated already. Probably something mind-blowing happened already. At least that's my expectation now, that every couple of minutes something completely mind-blowing that could change the whole tech scene could happen at any moment. But what's going on is the following, is that whatever happened at OpenAI happened on actually a very high level. And I don't have the expectations that we are going to solve any of the nitty-gritty details and the corporate backstabbing that's been going on OpenAI, but it's true that it's a very interesting moment that we are seeing a future major corporation, or already a current major corporation, that's being upended by what's not just a technical question about if OpenAI should be turned into products or not, or what kind of data Sam Altman was using for OpenAI. But it's a question is that what role should OpenAI have, or what role should AI play in our lives? And what we saw is that we had a company whose board had a function that was to actually curtail AI if they saw any dangers behind it. They were there as guardians of of AI governance. And then what happened is that they decided that the company's founder and CEO, Sam Altman, wasn't being candid on his communication. And what actually meant by being candid is that he was pushing AI to the public faster than they were comfortable with. And what happened is that they ousted Sam Altman, and for a couple of hours, it seems that it was a victory for those who believed that company boards could actually be there not to look for the latest profit, but to actually ensure good governance and some high brow idea of greater good. But in the end, what prevailed is that Microsoft stepped in, who Microsoft owns a good chunk of OpenAI, and now Sam Altman is back as CEO and the board is out. So now I think that now it looks more like what we expect for a tech company nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. So we still have to see how this soap opera will evolve in the next chapters, but apparently it's stable now. Sam Altman is back.
Yeah.
And besides all the other, all the numerous memes that circulated online regarding this corporate governance dispute, and Sam Altman apparently is back, and he's back and is going to stay. So OpenAI is again at in the hands of still of Sam Altman and still Microsoft backing up the interests of the organization. So let's see how it goes. And anything else from the tech scene that you would like to share, Gabriel, today with us, or should we already step into the domain of the next steps for extended reality or artificial intelligence even AI?
Yeah, well, one thing that happened, because all this OpenAI has been raining on the metaverse and XR parade for the last couple of days. The moment we actually were planning to start talking about humane AI, this new idea, this new AI-based interface, and they say it's the future of the iPhones. It's not a phone. It's just this machine that you clip on. And then the whole thing started happening at OpenAI, which means that it seems like people just, we're not be talking about any new gadgets or interfaces, because there's something much more fundamental going on there. And what I mean by fundamental, it really is. The thing is, now that we are talking about OpenAI, it's not just like some geek notion on, or a different kind of interface on how we deal with computers, but AI now is becoming a co-author of our reality. So if there's something that's been going on, and this discussion is just one of the biggest discussions that I see that ever happened since the invention of the printing press. Which is the fact that now knowledge is starting to get to a next phase in evolution, which is now we have AI co-authoring our reality, and like algorithms have been doing it already. Like everybody that always that looked into the financial sector know that AI been playing the market for a while already. But now, what's going to happen when we start seeing the world outside us through the eyes of AI-generated content?
Yeah, that's a very deep philosophical question, right? That, of course, we do not have the answers, but what we can say is definitely that AI is setting up a whole new horizon for interfaces and technological devices that we are still going to testimony. And the AI ping is just one of them that we have seen in the last couple of weeks. But if we think of AI not as a particular, of course, as a particular device, but as this operational system that can really challenge and shake everything that we know so far in regards to the potential and the potentiality of what devices can do and what human beings can do, then it's a big or a lot of big question marks regarding how this technology will unfold in the different domains. And when we were talking about this idea I just said about reality, what is real, what's unreal, we already saw the huge phenomenon of deepfakes especially in elections, when we saw this in the U.S. elections but also other ones, right? The production of deepfakes, the production of fake news, and the spread of fake news, really confusing and misleading people regarding all kinds of different ideas and political ideas. So what is truth and what is not truth? It's becoming increasingly hard to distinguish. And then when we now have AI and interfaces that could be used by everyone who has no knowledge of programming or no knowledge of anything, then you're adding a huge complexity to those discussions involving the impact on society.
Yeah. as a UX designer, like I like to see things through a usability point of view, and as a user from the user perspective. And what is very, very interesting about AI, which is new, is that it is very, at least its interface and having access to coordinate its outputs, it's very, very accessible, right? I've been giving lectures, and every time I start talking about the use of AI in schools in Brazil or in Latin America, people would come up, but we don't have access to this technology. Well, we might not have access to the data centers, not at the scale that some major American U.S. Tech companies have, but anyone with a cell phone, it doesn't even have to be a good cell phone, have access to AI and all the tools that it has available. I mean, not the best tools, because you still, like, if you want to use ChatGPT 4, you still have to pay for it, and it's pretty steep in local currency. Like, I think it's $20 a month. That's quite a lot of money, but it's not a huge amount of money. It's quite a lot of money for an individual user. It's almost nothing for a company, even here in Brazil. And the fact is that now anyone can go there and use AI to generate fake news. Because before then, that we still have this idea that in order for anyone to create fake news, we still imagine that you would have like at least someone sitting there on Photoshop, someone with who is knowledgeable on the intricacies of image editing and whatnot, would be able to edit and generate what people thought was sophisticated final products. But now with AI, you don't even need to code anything. You can just say to AI to generate something, and it would come out. And this is one of the main things that OpenAI's board was afraid of, and a lot of the people who are knowledgeable on this subject, who'd been for years trying to understand what are the risks of AI, is the risk of AI allows for fake news to reach a level that we never imagined. Even some Altman would say that, like he was really aware of that.
And to the degree that the production of those news or this information is such a massive, it's an overwhelmingly production of news or communication attempts, that we arrive at this stage that I want to bring, right? That already the Byung-Chul Han philosopher, he says it is this phenomenon of the communication, the spamming of communication.
Yeah.
Meaning that there's so much out there, 24/7, with everyone generating, producing new content without any need for curatorship or filtering anything. Like we're doing now, we are recording this, and then immediately we can post online, and we put out there. And the same as we are doing now, millions of people are doing on YouTube and on their blogs and other channels online. So we arrive in a stage where this overwhelmingly production of new content no longer communicates. And then the risk of this is that, well, information is accessible to everyone, but what kind of information do we want to consume and to get? And whether all this available information actually informs us well or doesn't, informs us.
And it's also there's a big question of authorship as well, right? Because now we always have this idea when we would see any kind of content, we're trying to understand who created that. Like maybe it was someone on the deep web, maybe it was a famous journalist from the New York Times. But now it will be not clear. Maybe it was an AI doing its own thing.
And can we imagine a scenario? It's easy to imagine now where people would actually tune in this channel and then just watch nonsense nonstop, right? And then it's like, but why are you doing this? I don't know. You're just like, I don't know. I just want to watch new stuff and AI generated stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird?
It's just,
like most weird is our behavior towards it, right?
Yeah.
Like what we expect from human beings when we give so like such a powerful technology in our hands.
Yeah.
That's the issue, right? It's like, yeah, the technology is so powerful, can do so much things that we cannot even imagine. But all right, are we capable of handling and engaging with these technologies in a responsible way, in a way that we are not hacked, so to speak, or kind of subsumed to the power of this technology, or get even more stupid, or you know what I mean? Like these kind of questions that we urge as philosophers to think about. It's the impact of technology on our cognition or our ability to behave as a human being, and what is expected from us to thrive and to reach kind of our own potentiality in our lifespan, when we have so many new technologies that can do almost everything and counting that we used to do and that only human beings were able to do until a very recent past.
well,
So that's kind of a criticism or that we are constantly having here as philosophers about, all right, this is a new tech tool. What is going to be the impact on us? What do we have? What is our say on that?
well, I have to say that one thing that I'm hopeful, you just said that that humans are going to be hacked, right? This notion that now these AI agents will be running amok and giving us content that we just cannot resist. And what makes me hopeful is that it's true that human cognition is easily hackable, right? There are some specific actions that you can do that we just cannot avoid not to look. I mean, advertising known this for a long time. But it's also very interesting that humans are also a complex system, because we are also, every single human is also a hacker. So every system that's set up for us to understand reality, it will be immediately, us as individual will immediately assimilate that system and make it ours. And some
Yeah.
people and some groups of people will start transforming this reality, this information, and creating a second parallel reality that's based on this initial image. And then when we start understanding these systems. So what I mean is that the moment that we are aware that the content that's being thrown at us is AI generated, right? The most pessimist of us will start thinking, well, the moment it means that we're going to be completely passive for it. But humans are never really passive to information, and we are never really unaware on how we're being manipulated. Ask anyone that came from any highly controlled society, and people said, "Oh, but you don't know the truth. You see that the government or the society around you is corrupt." And so people know that's corrupt, but we're just acting accordingly because we know that what's happening out there is not the truth. And I see a society that's going to be, by what I mean is that with AI we may actually be liberated in a way, because since we already know that most of the content that's being thrown to us is probably AI generated and does not represent unchanging truth, right? There are two ways we can go. We can either be completely nihilistic and then start saying that there is no truth, or a group of us might start developing a very keen sense on how to detect reality. and and
Yeah.
and something like that happened before in different moments of history, right? So
Yeah.
that's the so for example, we saw we were talking about the other day is that, you have photography, for example. You have like photography, right? Photography for a long time was one of the first human artifacts that promised to be a representation, a one-to-one representation of reality. And what happened is that the following is that liberated painters who before the advance of photography had the role of recreating a reality or describing reality to people. They were liberated because now there's photography doing that, and then painting and art evolved to directions never before imagined. And now we have this machine that can generate images. And what I see is that might liberate photography. I mean, not that photography wasn't liberated already. We already had conceptual photography for a long time. But now we have this machine that might liberate our understanding that not just because we are seeing things means that they're real. And then so we might need to create a new kind of discipline.
Yeah.
In order to coordinate that, to deal with that new reality.
Yeah. And that leads us to the simulations and simulacrum notion of Jean Baudrilard, which he already, when he was writing his book in, I don't know if it was the 2000, no, I think it was before, it was the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And I will not talk about the successive stages of this image in which he really describes, but only he says that we have reached already the hyper reality when he's specifically describing the role of images in the contemporary society. And he says that in this phase, the image, but we could also say and apprehend this concept and expand to not only images, but to audio, visual content, text, so on and so forth. There's no relation to any reality whatsoever. That means that when we are, it's precisely what you have just said, that, all right, we'll count on this technology, on AI, to produce a lot of things that beforehand we needed to produce with our own hands or with our own technical apparatus, like a photographic camera or a typewriter. And now AI can do those things autonomously. We only need to prompt, right?
Yeah.
And now actually we have an AI that it's a prompt AI that can talk to the machine to do whatever the AI prompt says, right? Crazy. So it's this pure notion of simulacrum. It's there's no relationship to any reality whatsoever. It's this pure hyper reality, and then we are living even more in this hyper reality. Probably we will end up in a even higher level when we are talking of extended reality technologies combined with AI in a pure simulated world or digitally enhanced world that we will embody when we will be using those interfaces such as glasses or headsets or pins or whatever will be the future of interfaces that we still don't know. And I liked your point about, okay, what about the art and this shift between the role of painters before the invention of the camera, which kind of, okay, the painters had a social role of representing realities, of portraying leaders, events, wars, these kinds of things. And then, okay, now the photography kind of substituted this primary role of painters and then liberated them to do whatever, to pursue their own aesthetics ideals, rather than just focusing on representing reality or events. But now when we clearly reached a new level with AI in terms of image generation, but now also text generation. So what are we seeking now to liberate us from? Is it, you know what I mean? This is the kind of question that I have.
Are we liberating ourselves from reality? It's funny that you talk about Boudrilard, because a lot of people ended up became acquainted with his book because of The Matrix and the movie Matrix. And I'm sorry to make everybody who's listening, that's me, including myself, feeling very old, but Matrix was released more than 24 years ago. And the whole idea of the Matrix is that, well, about heroes fighting to find what's real, right? Fighting for reality. And I remember when it was released, everybody started having these sometimes not very deep philosophical discussions, but still very fun philosophical discussions everywhere about, oh my God, the future will come and we won't know what's real. And they had a very apocalyptic view about it. And it's funny that now when you talk about with young people and people that are already who are already living, that have an extensions of their selves into the digital world, they already accept the fact that what's real is not really the point, right? The point is not if we all have a common, unquestionable reality, but the point is now, the discussion is what we do with what we have in common, right? What kind of reality we are generating, right? And at first, of course, I see the reaction to it is always the first phase of that is usually very optimistic. We start to imagine that everybody will start creating their own wonderful utopias. And then, of course, will come the apocalyptic view that said, oh, it'll be society will just be doomed to be enslaved by these realities. And again, I like to go back to the idea of the artist. I imagine that, what happened with the artists, with the painters in the 19th century, with the advent of the photography and then its later popularization, right? And then when it became easy to reproduce images in an industrial scale, is that it's not that the artists were liberated to do whatever they want. Is that artists have to learn a new discipline. And that discipline is, how can I create reality, or who am I as an artist, and what is my role in society? And by that mean is that, artists usually they don't work like scientists, but they are always very much aware of what science is creating. And what happened is that it's funny to say that the moment the artists were liberated by the photography was also the moment, when quantum physics was starting to people start discussing that, about all these ideas, all these mechanisms that people imagine were so fundamental for reality, was starting to unravel. And artists, what they did, that artists first, like with the impressionists and then the expressionists, and then with all the subsequent movements that happened in the 20th century, from abstraction, they started becoming these agents of molding different realities and showing the public. It's not that their goal was that to show anything. Artists don't have any goals, right? They're just making things but the world is reacting to it. Is that there is a huge potential in humanity, in creating different points of view, different realities, understand something different. And again, maybe what the Matrix, this question of what's real and what's not, is I really don't think it's maybe the point. It's really the question is understanding is that what we're going to do with all this new power, and maybe the freedom that AI would give us, right? Because now we have this entity that can create content that there's still humans that are asking for this content to be created. And of course, this created a lot of responsibility, not being paraphrased as Spider-Man or anything, big power is big responsibility and whatnot. But it's true on that regard.
And these contents we're going to be generating, they will be for whom, right? I think that's also the question you mentioned you mentioned the role of kind of the need that artists had to to rethink their social roles,
Yeah.
right? And I think AI is pushing us to rethink a lot of our social roles, what we
Everybody.
do,
Yeah.
and what about our skills, what they're going to be useful for,
Yeah.
or am I going to be completely irrelevant or replaced by machines or by this smart AI future system that we don't know yet. So these are the questions that now we are making at a very faster pace than previously, right? And I think that we are making those questions more and more at a decreased amount of time. So before, maybe it was one big question in the 18th or 19th century and 20th century regarding technological disruption, but still society and the social roles were very stable. But now, especially when we look at adolescents, young adults, professionals, university students, they're kind of completely lost regarding, okay, what is society expecting me to do
Yeah.
if I cannot say how the world will look like in the next 6 months or 1 year? And what are the mechanisms, or how should we think technology and technological development to actually promote action and engagement with other people? That I want to say this because apparently my observations is that it doesn't we are in a society that now, of course, we can reach anyone at any time, anywhere,
Yep.
which is great. But is this leading us to more connected beings? Are we feeling more fulfilled with those relations, or what is the quality of those relations? And the next point is, are we able to politically act based on internet connections and online connections? These are the kind of, or are we becoming even more individualistic in our own bubbles, consuming the content that we already like? So this is technology setting us apart rather than pulling us together? And if so, what would be the options, Gabriel?
Oh, okay. You want me to solve? Well, no. Okay, let me solve that in the next couple of minutes. I can solve humanity's future.
Yeah,
At least, why would anyone create a podcast if not for that, right?
yeah,
What the thing is that we are talking about the fact that this like artists have to learn a new discipline, right? They have to understand, reframe themselves. What is their role as an artist? And I think now, whatever happened to these artists, and actually what happened to factory workers as well, they were replaced with robots, right? Or I mean, this is not something that just started right now. People have been being replaced for a long time. Actually, ask anyone that studied chemistry or even engineering and back in the 40s. A lot of these people would actually be hired just to be draftsmen. They would be computers and calculators. They would be sitting on these huge benches,
yeah,
making the work that a CAD design or a computer would do in minutes, and that completely changed the roles. Society needed less and less engineers and chemists and chemical engineers who were just able to calculate, but they needed more and more those who could actually create, and those who had the discipline and that artists have to nurture. And it's funny to say that because I think I already said that here, but I have an aunt that she's been working on artificial intelligence since the 60s, and everybody always she's a genius in her field, but people always think that sometimes she's too far out. And I remember that 10 years ago, I was really worried that I wasn't a great coder. I had this thing, I have to learn to code, otherwise what I'm talking about, how can I talk about technology if I'm not a top coder? And then she came to me and said, you know what? In the future, the only job that's going to remain is the one of the artists. And
Wow, that's a profound statement.
yeah, so like engineers, we won't need engineers. We're actually gonna need artists. And then at first I felt like this is absurd. And then as I saw that that machines were doing more and more the work of for example people at the financial sector, people that work in finance, they're being replaced by either engineers
Algorithm.
or computers and algorithms. And then what happened is that AI now actually seems to be creating creative outputs. And then I imagine, oh my god, that not even that, even the artists as the ones that are going to be thrown away, right? But you ask anyone that worked on design. A lot of studios are already having second thoughts of hiring a designer for basic things, right? For illustrating their website or for making a business card, because they don't need a professional to do that anymore. AI can just like generate thousands of variations in seconds, and of course they might not be as good as the one created by a person, but so isn't anything. So wasn't all the output from factories. They were not better than things created by hand, but they were cheaper and made more available. But what she was actually talking, what my aunt was actually talking about being an artist, that everybody will have to be an artist, is that we will have to be able to create our own paths, right? Because there will be no one saying which procedures to follow in order to be successful. So we're all going to be artists. It's the scariest thing of being an artist.
I
And
saw.
now we all have to deal with that.
Yeah. I saw the other day a post on Instagram saying that being successful is having a calm nervous system. And I really identified myself. Like, this is a good definition of success, because of course technology is embedded within the economic system and technological development as well, right?
Yep, of
And
course.
it is a kind of a machine that is producing constant agony and anxiety on individuals, because indeed that's the feeling you just said, right? 10 years ago it's okay, how I'm going to talk about technology if I do not know how to code, or do I need to code? And then there's a new technology or tool that, okay, replaces the coder, the engineer, the prompt engineer. And then, well, then I learn this skill, which takes me years to get better and better. And now it's no longer needed, or it's not as needed as it was needed a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so what are the things that will last? And I really agree with this idea that artists will always be here and will always be around, because um, even if we go back to our last episode, which I mentioned about Heidegger
Yeah.
and the text that is named "The Question Concerning Technology," he really goes into, and he does a deep etymological research regarding the word technology. And technology derives from the Greek, from the word techne, which means technique, but also but also means art in Greek. In fact, techne is the word technique for art and technique in Greek, but it was translated to Latin to ars, A-R-S. That's why we also have art.
Uh-huh.
So he says that the roots of the word technique was kind of together. It's the same with the word of art. They're the same. It's just a different. It's just that those two different words, or the same word but those two different meanings, they have different impacts on how we behave and how we approach things when we are dealing with objects and with tools.
Do you mean
So
it? Do you mean? So, sorry, I understand. Do you mean that then art and techne once were one thing, and then it was turned? They were separated. There was a moment in history when it was separated. And
yeah,
do you think that we will have to like we're bringing them back together?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so, because especially if you look at early ages of technique, in even the craftsmanship, the work of craftsmanship
Mm-hmm.
in producing weapons, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
swords,
Mm-hmm.
or it was deeply connected with rituals, with sacred gods, with aesthetics. So the shape of things, the shape of the artifacts, the shape of those tools that early human beings in tribes used to develop and create was really connected to these aesthetics, to their aesthetics. So art and technique, they work together. If you understand what I want to mean.
Yep.
And then technique suddenly, well, not suddenly, but through the course of history, became only kind of this idea of an object that it's a mere means to accomplish certain ends, and the aesthetics component lost itself, right? Like we in the industrial age,
Yeah.
we're not no longer concerned with how buildings are looking like. Well, we just have to build efficient factories, and they should be ugly, and they should be. So the role of architecture, the role of architecture comes in as an art, as a form of art to the built environment. So architecture is this combination of technique that requires knowledge of engineering, calculus, structural things, and the aesthetic component, which is the beauty of things. And artists, going back to, not, I already did a huge loop,
Yeah.
but going back to you, it's this role of, I think it's what artists want to bring, uh, if not only beauty, but also provocative questions, challenging status quo, and putting at us, throwing to the spectators, to the people who contemplate their art, as like, okay, it's providing a different worldview from what we are used to, right? That's the role of artists, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we should always be careful when we talk about the question of beauty, especially regarding art, because not only because beauty is subjective, is because it changes so much. But the truth is that, like, when a work of art is about giving meaning where there was none before, right? And it's interesting that you're talking about this, how craftsmen, right, would deal with their craft, like a weaponsmith in Greece. Is that if you see these objects, you can understand that many of them were actually imbued with a meaning that is truth that was not related to its actual use, and you can see that on the temples, and I mean all the official objects and artifacts that humanity was creating. And then you see that on the industrial age is, I don't, it's not that people, it's not in the industrial, I mean, I have to talk about the Bauhaus guys, they would be really sad if we start saying that everything they do is ugly. But the truth is that they, the modern world that we live on, we we don't try to imbue meaning to the objects that we generate, right? We started creating special little environments outside our daily lives where meaning exists. And it's true that maybe a lot of the anxiety that we're feeling nowadays, and this urge that people have to fire out realities, is might be actually urge to find meaning, because we don't have meaningful objects, we don't live in meaningful spaces anymore, people
Yeah,
don't have meaningful relationships anymore,
yeah,
and
exactly.
so
You touched the point.
yeah, so where is the meaning, and adding meaning to an object. The truth, also, the one thing I say, that when we start imagining that art and technique joining forces again,
Yeah,
is also, it's not this wonderful beautiful thing. I see it as a very traumatic experience that we're going to have to go through, as humanity, because giving meaning to something was usually a role that was given only to very specific members of society. And now we live in a democratic. I'm moving away, but imagine this. Now we live with this aspirations of having a more democratic society. And OpenAI can allow us, and AI in general, can allow anyone to create very complex artifacts. But then, does this mean that everybody's going to be able to give it meaning, or are we going to wait for these special selected entities that could be real or not to provide us with the meaning for these artifacts?
And I think that's totally true. It's the role will be, or our role will be, okay, where and what we want to put meaning on the things that we do, right? And I give you an example that just came to my mind a few months ago when I was leaving the Netherlands, and I was writing a preface for the book that my classmates were putting together with the best articles that we wrote throughout the master's program, so that we could take it to our homes in the different countries once we were separated. And it took me a while to write this preface. And I remember that I encountered one person at the university who was an engineer and did not do the course that I did in philosophy.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you ask ChatGPT to write this preface for you? And you can really prompt in a way that it will resonate with your style, so that it's not anything completely, weird to you. And then I say, yeah, but the fact is that this is something that I want to put meaning on it, right? What I'm writing here is my feeling. It's my personal way of expressing how I experienced this program, and the words that I'm thinking carefully of each word that I want to write in order to arrive in a final text. And not only, I'm not aiming for the end result. So if we think of AI and its ability to generate content, in whatever form, it's really, we are looking only and focused only in the ends, right? The end, the result.
Yeah.
What is AI capable of doing for me?
Yeah.
And we are not thinking about the whole journey or the whole investment of time and effort and thinking, and that it would require us to do so have we not have the AI. So this is something that scares me a little bit more, just a little bit. Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic more than you on thinking about the actual consequences for relationships and for empathy and for patience and for carefully listen to the others and to carefully understand, well, or at least see and listen other points of view, if we're only focused with results and our arrival points. And this goes to relationships, especially relationships. It's like we no longer now listen to WhatsApp audio on the one, normal time. We have to speed it up to 1.5 to 2. And it's like, why are you doing this for?
But of course, nobody who's listening to us is doing that, right? Of course, everybody who's listening to this podcast will be listening at the expected 1x speed.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, look, even when we are doing this here, and it's kind of a therapeutic session for both of us. We are engaging in this conversation, that it's valued per se in terms of, well, yeah, we are simply recording this and posting there for maybe people will listen to it, maybe not, maybe they will listen to 1.5, maybe not, but it's
God
this
forbid 2x. Let's talking like that. We're talking like that really fast.
Yeah. It's this matter of just acting and engaging with one another that invites us for even more deeper reflections and better thinking, that in doing this conversation with you, I'm thinking better than if I was just sitting on my own or thinking on my own, or consuming content only from other people. It's this complexity that we have uh, uh, um, to get, how do we say, conscious of, and kind of turn into something that will actually benefit not only myself but society or my community or the people that I'm relating with, that I see, that I interact with, my neighbors, my city fellows, and but what we see is that, at least for now, the majority of people, they are separated, they are split, they are in their own place, living in their own bubbles, in their own realities. And I think the way that we interact with technology today on the internet and other devices, it only kind of expands this further rather than the other way around. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and are we treating other people, and are we treating, or are we behaving with things and interacting with things in a very kind of commodified way, treating everyone as commodities purely, and not even having time to celebrate a meal with your family, because everyone has its own needs and urgencies and activities, that I actually can just heat it up, the meal in the microwave, instead of sharing the moments with the family in a meal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think humanity is being drowned in convenience? In this regard, it's just so convenient not to care and not to have meaning. But
Yeah.
then what happens is that if you live a life that is devoid of meaning, or everyday actions are so convenient, or they be so detached to any actual interaction, is that I believe that then what happens is that then people get overly sensitive to meaning, and the moment they see the slightest hint of meaning, what I'm afraid is that then the people will lose the critical perception of meaning. What I mean is that the moment they see a political figure or a TikToker that makes them feel anything that's slightly beyond convenience, that society will end up becoming completely overwhelmed, or at least for a couple of seconds, until the next convenient thing show up and the next convenient idea. So it's not. I'm not that afraid of the passivity that this lack of meaning in our actions bring, but also how unprepared this makes us to when we actually see something that can be meaningful.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to just kind of still to this point, which is like, to have meaning is also requires to have a certain kind of maturation. Things have to mature. You have to. It requires time. It requires investment. It requires effort. Right? It's not this kind of. We have now meanings that are on a Snapchat base, like story mode. It's 24 hours, it disappears. And I just want to cite a little paragraph that can be a bridge to our next episode.
Okay.
From a book written by Sherry Turkle. It's called Live on the Screen, Identity in the Age of the Internet.
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, there's this passage in which she details that the ability of the internet to change popular understand of of the internet, of identity. And then she says that on the internet, we are encouraged to think of ourselves as fluid, emergent, decentralized, multiplicitous, and ever in process, right? So it says that the internet has become a significant social laboratory for experimenting with the constructions and reconstructions of self that characterize postmodern life. And then the question is precisely what sort of identity does the net encourage us to construct?
Yeah.
Right? We are only constantly metamorphosing into identities and profiles
Yeah.
and reshaping how we want to look in the eyes of the others
Yeah.
rather than go all the way, in one kind of stable identity. What are identities and what are the ways that we want to be?
My God,
So kind of
this is
generate huge existential crises too, right?
and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
Right, it's exhausting. No wonder you see so many reactionary movements around the world right now of people. Hey, remember the time when you were just born something and that's what you were forever because someone higher than you said that you should be this forever. And now we have all these options. We have to deal with all these realities and sometimes physical realities, these different nationalities, these people, these different perspectives, these different roles, even on yourself. And that requires, I believe that requires support. That requires discipline. Otherwise, people just get exhausted and fed up, or completely they just throw it everything. Today I'm this, tomorrow I'm something else, and then they come to the realization they don't know what they are, and few people feel completely alone. So
Yeah.
but I think that's now that would be great to talk about that if I still see myself as myself till next week, if I don't get completely dissolved into the internet foam.
Yeah.
I Yeah, no, that's something really really powerful to deal with. What is identity, and what kind of society does this internet, AI driven internet, will generate in the future?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think we have way more questions and reflections, and it evolved.
Yes.
Conversation we started with
Yeah.
AI and some outcome ending up in an existential crisis regarding what kind of
Yes.
identities does the internet fosters us in. And then if we think of now extended reality technologies, what are the identities and the avatars that we will craft and shape according to what standards, what for, for whom.
And
So
we didn't even have to watch The Matrix again to start talking about that.
no, not at all, with all the filters and everything. Yeah, exactly. Well,
Okay.
I guess that was it for the day. A lot of things, a lot of anxieties and anguish and very
And
deep
possibilities.
and possibilities. But sometimes, anguish, we also have to embrace. I mean, we also live in this society where we cannot never be sad or down with anything, right?
No, change is hard.
We are wrong if we criticize.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to be always positive, always. And sometimes you have to recognize, that things are not going so well, and then what should we do, and what should we think, how we should think to make it better, right? To make it better, because there are possibilities, and art is there and will always be to help us showing up, disclosing new possibilities.
Yes.
Right.
Existential dread can be wonderful once you.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, Leonardo. That was great.
Should we finish?
Yes.
This
Let's say goodbye to all our 2 listeners. Maybe you have 3 in the near future. Who knows? But again, Leonardo, great talking to you once again, and I'm looking forward to meeting with you again next week.
Likewise. Bye bye.
Bye bye.